You're about to watch an incredible conversation with my friend Bryce Danley. Bryce is an incredible man of God who has been able to be successful in many ways, but so often because of his success, he's been called into many forums to bring his leadership. And a lot of that comes because Bryce has an incredible way to discern and make decisions. In fact, I really think that Bryce could be a professional decision maker. You could put him at a desk with a yes, no, try again stamp at his desk, and he could sit there all day long because he's got a great ability to discern the right thing and especially discern what God's saying and to live what we were talking about in the last episode, the amphibious life, the ability to live both present here in this world and eternally in a spiritual sense and interacting with the Trinity. So you're really going to enjoy this. Watch this interview with my friend, Bryce Danley. Welcome to the Leveraging Success podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Gerhardt. Every time that we're together, I want to help you to work less, make more, to get leverage in your life. And with the freedom that you gain and the margin that you start to store up, you're going to be able to be in a more incredible husband, wife, parent, and most importantly, live the calling that God designed you for. You know, what we purport here, what I want you to believe is that, in fact, God has made you for a purpose. And the purpose that he's building in you, that you're discovering, is the one that he's always made you for. And here's what I'm believing. I believe that this year we will see a new revival for Christ, that the kingdom leaders and those who have never thought of themselves as kingdom leaders, but have found themselves in various leadership forms will start to decide that we're going to lead the church and that there's going to be new forms of people sharing their faith, new forms of people following in their faith, following Christ. I can't imagine how great it could be, but my hope is that this will be the year that you and I will start to lead more in the kingdom. Hey, every time that we're together, we're working through this process. I want to be able to either give you ideas and concepts that you can work through, tell you stories of people that have gone through it, or bring on special guests that can talk about their own life. And today I have a really, really special guest with me here. Bryce. Bryce is my dear friend and is a private wealth advisor and the founder of Danley and Associates. Now, Bryce Danley formed this private wealth advisory practice as a part of Ameriprise Financial Services. He's based in Fort Worth, Texas. Now, his background includes more than 30 years in the financial industry, and he is in his 28th year with Ameriprise. He has an economics and finance degree from Baylor University, and he holds a degree in financial planning. Bryce holds a certified financial planner, that's CFP designation, and accredited portfolio management advisor designation. Bryce has a long history with Ameriprise and has served in many capacities with the company, including formal leadership and training roles, many committees, and speaking engagements to advisors around the country. Bryce would tell you, more importantly, that he's been married for 34 years and has 2 grown married children and 2 grandchildren. He loves traveling, all things basketball, playing guitar, and reading. Bryce is an active member in his community. He's also a member of Christ Chapel Bible Church in Fort Worth. He serves on the board of 2 missions organizations, Uncharted Ministries, which we both love, and ArmLink Ministries, as well as an organization focused on mentoring 4th graders in low-income situations called Academy 4. He and his wife, Sharon, also had many years of service at Covenant Classical School in Fort Worth. Bryce and Sharon are also members of the Master's Program. On top of that, Bryce and Sharon are close friends. We first met in Saudi Arabia on a first-of-its-kind trip some years back. We'll try to fit that in and talk a little bit more about that here today. I'd love to share with you that trip where Bryce and I first met. Bryce, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for joining me here today.
Jeff, glad to be with you, friend. Thanks for having me on.
Now, Bryce, you don't or won't be surprised how I feel about you as a deeply insightful, soul-led leader. And as we were in the run-up to this discussion today, what we were talking about was really around the soul. Now, when we talk about soul, it can be sometimes confused as the same thing as spirit. But the writer in Hebrews said that those two things are joined together, and they're like conjoined twins. But when we think about our spirit, we think about the vertical relationship we have with the Trinity. And when we think about our soul, we think about that energy or heart or feel that we have on the inside, as well as what we project on the outside. So soul level development is what I want to get into today. But first, I want them to be able to get to know you, Bryce. Maybe you would add to that story or tell a little bit of our story the first time that we met in Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, that's a great story. We got invited. Tom Doyle and Joanne Doyle are close friends of ours. They're the heads of Uncharted Ministries. And my wife Sharon volunteers and is part of their ministry team. And Tom got invited to be one of the first licensed tour guides to Saudi Arabia, and called up one day and said, we're doing a new tour. We have no idea what we're doing. Would you like to come along? I need to know in an hour. And I like to take more time than that to make decisions, but it just seemed so awesome. We just felt quick. We prayed really quick and then made a decision, and it came along. And I didn't know what would happen on the trip from any standpoint, but one of the joys was getting to meet you and Heather, and we felt drawn to you guys immediately. And I remember one day we were driving, it seemed like about 120 miles an hour in a suburban without a road, and dust everywhere. And I was pretty sure we were going to make it, but not entirely sure. And that was tons of fun. Headed down to the Red Sea, if I remember correctly.
That sand dune ride in those, I think they were Land Cruisers.
Yeah.
And those guys, they didn't know where the brake was. They were going as fast as they could across those sand dunes. And we were whooping it up like we were in high school, but thinking awesome. Like, I'm an adult now, so I've got something to lose here.
That's right.
But nothing like a call from Tom Doyle that says, hey, you got an hour to decide. Now, anyone else tries to pull that on you or I think we've got some issues. But with Tom, it's more like, there's going to be a gift inside of this. Are you willing to jump, right?
That's right. Trust him, love him, and hard to say no to him about a lot of things. So
no doubt.
Yeah.
No doubt.
But what a gift to meet you guys. And that's started another part of our journey, just deeper involvement with Uncharted, involvement with the master's program, and then, a lot of other things. You and I have a lot of connections, actually, don't we?
We do. And we've been able to learn a lot. I mean, that trip to Saudi Arabia was the first of its kind. As I understand, we were only the second Western tour group to ever, or to go through there in decades, because it had been a closed country. And then wonderfully, they've opened it up. They've given us access to view sites where antiquities and things had been discovered, where Mount Sinai is, to see where most likely, high probability, where exactly the Israelites crossed the Red Sea there in the Sea of Aqaba, and what the evidence points to there. It was breathtaking historically, and the beauty of the country. I didn't conceive of how beautiful Saudi Arabia was until being there and seeing it. It was spectacular, and the night sky and the rock formations. I mean, there were these orange waves in the sand of this beautiful sea, and then these random camels just walking around. It was like a movie, not Ishtar or something, but you're in the middle of the desert, and then you have these mountains in this place where Split Rock is, where we believe that Moses struck the rock and water came out. You got to actually hike Mount Sinai, which at the top of it is black, which it seems like all these mountains, none of them are black, but this one is black on the top where God's fire rained down. Incredible. Could you talk a little bit about, you took the adventure that Heather and I did not, you
Yeah.
hiked that thing.
Well, and as I'm listening to you, I'm thinking about other people listening to this, and that probably sounds like something that probably never happened that you're making up. I mean, it's just so off the chain.
Yeah,
But
really.
it was just, I think we live in a world where mostly there's not that many pioneering experiences left, unless you're like an astronaut or like you can, go under the ocean 10,000 meters or something. I mean, maybe you can explore some stuff that no one's ever seen, but really hardly any Westerners have ever been to that part of Saudi Arabia. And we were just pinching ourselves. We'd seen videos about exploring, maybe a different site for Mount Sinai, maybe 15 or 20 years ago. And next thing we know, we say yes to this. We're getting to meet people like you and a bunch of other neat people. And next thing I know, I'm hiking up Mount Sinai in the dark, and it was kind of treacherous and kind of interesting, and is that really the cave where Elijah stayed? That kind of stuff. Like it was truly a once in a lifetime experience, and we just feel like it was a gift from the Lord to be able to get to do something like that.
Yeah, true gift. And one of my favorite stories of many that we had there was when we were in those Land Cruisers and we're flying through the desert. As you said, no roads. It's just that these guys are like at the third mountain and the sixth palm tree. You might see a monkey there and you're going to turn. I mean, it was like no directions whatsoever. And we were going. And all of a sudden the guys are like, I don't know where I'm at. And like, well, we don't know where we're at. And they were lost. And so they're talking between themselves in Arabic. And we're like, well, we are in the middle of the desert, somewhere in northern Saudi Arabia. I'm not sure where I'm at. And so they turn around, and all of a sudden, and just imagine that you have driven miles and miles out into the sand, mountains everywhere, and you don't know where you're at, but then randomly, there are these three Bedouins that are there on a rug, doing their prayers, that are there that can give us directions, right? And it went back to the same directions I just jokingly gave. They were in Arabic saying, well, you missed the mountain where you're supposed to turn and you're going to make a left there. And so we turned around after these guys had given us the directions and got back to the sites, which included a really compelling place where you could see hieroglyphs and paintings on rocks that described worshiping of bulls and cows. And it looks very compelling that would be the place where the golden calf was made with the Israelites there. There were so many feelings when you're standing there and realizing, okay, that's where Moses would have talked to them. It's probably where he would have, lost it and got very upset when he looked down and saw all of them worshiping this golden calf. The ability to be in that, it just felt like we'd stepped into the pages of the Bible.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah, again, it sounds like something that didn't happen, that you're just making up for your podcast. You know what I mean? But we really stood there. I really have pictures of all that stuff, and there was nothing there. There was no. We didn't sign a waiver. We didn't have to go through a turnstile. There was no little. Grab this little walkie-talkie and you can listen to some stuff about this site. Like there's nothing there at all. It was just us and just imagining just stuff that you've read about it in the Bible, and it probably was there, So I don't know. There's got to be a sermon in there somewhere, right? Just say yes to the Lord and He'll take you to a place that you don't imagine. And that's been a stark one for us, in our lives for sure.
Well, and that's really what I'm after, is to talk a little bit more about your adventure, because a lot of your successes and growth, and I would say mine as well, have come from the fact that we've been willing to do out of the box, a little crazy, without all the details, but I was willing to say yes. And, Bryce, What's the math that you go through internally when you're considering taking risk on, and when you say yes to something? Do you have a process, or is it gut? Is a bit of a gut and a process? What does that look like?
Well, for me, it's not just me. It's for anything big. It's Sharon and I. We work on these things together. We've been married 34 years. She's a godly woman, and she's got wisdom, and we think very differently. And so when we put us together, as we work our way through that, I think God works in that for us. But I think I think about some risks that we took in our journey. One of them was moving from a very secure, had a government career I always say, with lots of holidays and a government pension. And I had that in my 20s. And somewhere along the line, I just felt like that just wasn't what God wanted me to do for the rest of my working days. And I'd had a class on financial planning in college. I really liked it, but hadn't chosen it as my initial career, and just felt like maybe that was where the Lord was leading me. And so I did some work. I took some study. I worked on something called the Certified Financial Planner designation. I did a lot at night and on the weekends. And so I did some table setting there. But at some point, you got to figure out, are you going to change careers, leave your pension and all that other stuff, and move a different direction? And so we looked at it. We did pros and cons. We thought about it. We did math. We did all those things. But at some point, it's Sharon and I, and we're praying and we're asking the Lord to lead us. Is this really what you want us to do or not? And we're waiting for that still small voice to speak to us. And when we felt enough assurance that that was really what God had for us, we made a change. And I think there was people that didn't understand that at the time, but God was in that, and He took us that direction. And so God's really worked in that part of my life, in that part of my career, and led me to build something pretty neat, but helped lots and lots of people along the way. But that's just one of the things. So I think for us, the process is using our brains, using our mind, using our training and our experience, thinking about it in an intense way, but also bringing those things before the Lord and looking for His leading.
Okay. So this, I think, is what is really helpful for people, because I talk to a lot of people that I get to coach, consult, spend time with, and there's always the decision-making factor. And so tell me what you think about this premise, is that when we're making decisions, oftentimes once we know the Lord and trust Him for inputs, wisdom beyond my capabilities, to download to me, God, do you think I should do this? Check yes, check no, check something else, and we're in front of Him looking for that. And my premise is that we're working in a tension of both a delegated authority with which I have a brain, and the power of a board of directors, so to speak, in the Trinity that want to offer me insights, or perhaps will allow for me to operate in the designation that I'm a king, I'm a priest, I'm a leader. I have the ability to rationally decide. And what I often find is that they don't say this word, but underneath it all, people believe that there's a perfect answer. And if I get it right, if I shake the God magic 8 ball and He says, and now I'm guaranteed success, or I'm guaranteed no problems, or it's just gonna go right. And I know you would say that would be flawed thinking.
Yeah.
But getting into something that is both spiritual and physical at the same time, decision making and managing that strain of, God has asked me to think, God has asked me to gather wisdom, God has asked me to be His delegated authority with His inputs. And frankly, if I'm leaning on Romans 8:28, everything's going to work together because I love Him. He's going to make it all good. Even my mess, He will make look good. So could you talk a little bit about that? I mean, that strain, do do you buy what I'm saying there? Would you add to, your own process of how you're processing? Do I need to wait more to hear something from God? Has he given me the answer? Is he expecting me to make the answer? Or did I get the answer and missed it? How are you thinking about that, especially when you're processing with Sharon?
Super easy question, Jeff. I appreciate that. No, I think it's a great question. It's one of the most important questions you could ask someone in life is how do you make decisions? And if you're a
Yeah.
believer, like how does that inform the way that you walk? And, I do think it is a mixture. And I'm getting more and more comfortable with the mystery part of God as I get a little bit older and maybe hopefully a little more mature. So should I be thinking about it? Yes. Should I spend time doing research on something? Yes, I should be doing that. Should I ask advice from other people that I trust and respect that I think have good perspective? Yes. Should Sharon and I be talking about this and mulling it over? Yes. Should we be separately going to the Lord and asking for his input? Yes. And should we be, coming back together and going, okay, what are you hearing? What are you leading? Where do you think God's leading you? We should do all of those things. And at some point, you make a decision, right? We are going to do the thing or we're not going to do the thing. And what I've seen in my own life is that when I walk through, maybe not all those steps, but at least some of those steps, as I'm making some decision that's a material one, I've noticed that I feel the calmness coming over me. I feel like God's settling my brain down, like I'm coming to terms with this is what I'm supposed to do. And then I have my faith says that if I make a decision that doesn't work out, that he's gonna work in that. He's gonna clean that up. He's gonna use that to his glory, to my benefit. I mean, most valuable lessons really came from things that were difficult, that were challenging, that were probably not what I really wanted at the time. And God is big enough, good enough, and strategic enough to use all that stuff to grow me into more of what he wants me to be.
Yeah. And that process, I think, is most importantly related around how much more can I be with you, God? How much more can I know you?
Mm-hmm.
It's true that with the delegated authority you've given me, I can operate and act in best faith, even without checking in with you. Now, I'm not recommending it. I'm just simply saying that there's plenty of things. You just mentioned the word material. And is the decision material or not? Well, that's a decision for me to decide when is it material, when is it not, and all of these things that we may or may not put in front of the Lord for. Well, Bryce, when I was growing up, I wanted God to tell me everything. Like I'm in high school, I'm like, God, I got $2 in my pocket and this bubble gum. Should I buy this bubble gum today?
Yeah.
And it was material, I suppose, to me then. But the point really wasn't looking for a way to now tell me, should I take this step? Now tell me, should I take that step? As much as it is the walking with learning about him, letting him show you yourself, expose things that he wants to change.
Mm-hmm.
And that very much involves pain and pleasure in the process, and that the walking with God isn't making that an exclusive to pleasure. Although with as much affluence as we've got in our country, it would be really easy to think that it should all just work out. Could you color a little bit of your own story with, how has pain played into the process for you to develop and discover who God is?
I'd love to do that. Let me back up just a little bit, because something you said there sparked a thought in me. And Sharon and I and some close friends, we're going through a Dallas Willard book called Hearing God, and it's thick. It's a little bit challenging to read, but gosh, it's really good. And he talks about relationship that God has with us and how it's like the relationship that we have with our kids. And so there were things when my kids were under my leadership and in my house.
I bet recently you've spent a lot of time measuring. Perhaps, like me, you're measuring on a weight scale or you're measuring as you're going to the gym because you're strengthening yourself. Have you ever taken the time to measure where you're at from a whole life perspective? I'm going to offer to you the life balance assessment that we have now on the PriorityLiving.org webpage. You can go to PriorityLiving.org, and right there on the homepage, you're going to be able to take the life balance assessment. Here's what you can do in just a few minutes for yourself. You're going to be able to measure the significant life that you've got against biblical standards and find out for yourself, where are you at? Now, remember, this process is meant for you to create conversation. Maybe it's conversation with you and the Trinity. Maybe it's conversation that you want to have with us, or maybe it's a conversation you want to have with a spouse, peer, or mentor. Nonetheless, the process is to measure, because what we know is what you measure gets better. So go to PriorityLiving.org. Right there on the webpage, you'll see the life balance assessment. Click on that life balance assessment. It's free. And along with that, the assessment will come along to you in a PDF, and you'll have all sorts of diagnostic information that you're going to be able to use to plan your year and to stay on course for a significant life. I hope you enjoy it. Let me know what you think of it. Feedback to me here in the podcast what you think about the life balance assessment.
Where they really needed to ask my permission for various things, and they really shouldn't have made a decision about something without coming asking Dad, is this okay or not? But as they're getting older and more mature, they got to the point where they needed less and less of that, where they already knew what I would say. They already knew what was right for the Danleys, what was right for them, and they didn't need to come and check in on every little thing. In fact, less and less as we go. And so Willard, I think, does a great job of comparing that to the relationship that we should have with the Lord, where we do, when we're young and immature, we probably need to check on all kinds of things. But if we're really, truly walking with Him, it should be obvious to us as we're maturing what direction that we should take in certain places. So how should we treat people? We don't have to ask the Lord about that every single time, right? We should be kind and generous and faithful and truthful and all these kinds of things. And I think that should inform us as we go.
Huge Dallas Willard fan. In fact, for those of you who may not be familiar with that book, here in the show notes, I'll have a link to get a copy of that book. It's absolutely worth reading. I think it's got great insight to what we're talking about here. I'm glad you mentioned that, Bryce. So this journey then, to be able to discern God's voice, to hear Him, there's a lot that has to do with the condition of my soul. And so at the open, I was talking a little bit about the soul's formation, the likeness and uniqueness of soul versus spirit. And here we're talking about soul, because my soul's on display to you, your soul's on display to me. It's a little bit hard for me to see my own soul without feedback or a little bit of self-reflection, perhaps even Holy Spirit giving me insights into that. And so this formation of soul happens in process of belief. And that belief then leads to faith, and faith to more trust. And the more trust I have on account with the Lord, the more willing I am to risk. And so when we're going through that calculus of, should I say yes to you got 1 hour to decide to go to a Saudi Arabia trip, to should I buy this house, or should I take a change from a governmental job to something that's a lot more entrepreneurial in work as a financial planner or wealth manager. So all of those decisions have a lot to do with the virtual emotional account that I have with the Lord. And even my countenance and joy and the way that people are going to experience me has a lot to do with how much am I trusting my dad, my Father in heaven, for what's going on here. And is he all that he says that he is? Do I really believe that? And if I'm really believing that, my soul's getting full, and I'm willing to jump out in faith and take risks. In your experience, Does that resonate, or what would you add to that to talk about the way that our souls impact the way we make decisions?
Well, I think that makes me think of one of my favorite quotes from a mutual friend of ours, Mike Fitzsimmons. And Mike says, he says, whenever I'm in a crisis of faith, I look back at all that Lord's done for me, and it gives me confidence, something along those lines. And I think that's just such a valuable exercise for us as believers. If you've been walking with God for any length of time, all of us can look back and see where God was there for us in a difficult time, helped us in some material and significant way. And I think when we're at those moments where we have to make decisions where sometimes you don't get to decide between two awesome choices, right? Sometimes you have to choose between two incredibly difficult choices. That's the definition of a dilemma, choosing between two equally bad choices. And sometimes we have to make those choices. And I think there's a process we're supposed to go through. But the confidence that I get when I do feel confident, it's because I'm looking and I'm thinking, God's been there for me. He's going to be there for me this time. I've done everything. I'm trying to be faithful in the way that I pursued the decision making here. Either I had weeks or months to make the decision and I walked through this big, long process, or maybe I have a moment just to make a decision. I don't have time for lots of prayer and study and getting counsel and all those things. I have to make a decision right this moment. I'm asking that the Lord's leading me through my day, and I'm confident that His Holy Spirit's walking with me, and that I'm not going to be perfect, but He's going to clean things up in a way that glorifies Him. And so when I can stay in that mindset, my confidence goes up. I think I'm more present. Anytime I'm fearful, that's not of Him at all. And just because I feel pressure doesn't mean that I'm afraid, right? Just because you have a difficult decision on your plate and you're aware of the fact that it has significant implications doesn't mean necessarily that you're afraid, right? And so I have to be aware of that. Ooh, my body feels, one of the awareness things I do sometimes is, wow, I feel tension right now. That's my body telling me I want to do well right now. And so that's true. I do feel those things. Is God here? Is He relevant? Is He part of all this? Does He love me? Am I asking? Am I trying to be faithful here? What do I believe God wants me to do here? And let's go ahead and do that and implement it to the best of my ability. And that kind of thinking, when I'm there, that's the best that I get. And I've just seen God work in that.
Do you vocalize that? I mean, that's a really great practice. I think, did you say you're vocalizing, I'm feeling this, so I'm going to say it out loud so then I can process why am I feeling this way, or what should I do as a result? Am I understanding that right?
Yeah, sometimes I'll say it out loud, or like if I'm working, sometimes I work a lot of programs with other younger people. I do a lot of mentoring and stuff. And so we're headed into something big, and I'll say, how do you feel right now? And they're like, I feel pretty, scared or tense or whatever. And I'm like, yeah, everybody feels that way. Who wouldn't feel that way in a moment like this? Like you're headed into this thing and it's something big could happen here, or maybe it won't, and you're wondering. So I'm trying to do that with other people that I'm leading, but I'm telling that to myself. I mean, it's helpful when I can get outside of myself and look on my own situation, have a little bit of different perspective. It's calming for me. I do a better job. I felt a little tense coming on here with you today. I'm like, what's Jeff going to do with me? So I'm like, well, this is as good as I can get. Let's show up and see what God does.
Well, I hope the mystery has been solved, and we haven't done anything too crazy, but that's an amazing soul level practice, is to say what's happening. Leaders that are in tense situations, when they say, hey, I'm feeling some tension right now, are you feeling it? That creates a ability to say, yeah, I am too. Okay. So, hold on, let's reassert what we know is true, like what you just did. Some big things could happen. Who knows what could happen? But I'm glad that you're aware of this feeling. And while we talk about, reestablishing truths that maybe because of the tension of the feelings, they started to become loosed or far from us at the moment, we bring those things back into perspective and then allow for at least ourselves, if not others, to join us in grabbing the rope again really hard and establishing grip and calm, while there's still things that are on the line, but that it's not the unspoken thing that we're all melting on the inside about.
Well, the more
It's
I am
really good.
aware of my own emotions, the less likely I am to be enslaved to them. My emotions are part of me, like that's how all humans are made. But I don't have to go the direction that they push me all the time. But if I don't remember that there's different parts of me and different things going on, if I don't get outside myself a little bit and see it, it's really hard to do the right thing when I feel, emotion that's leading me to the wrong place. And so
Yeah.
just being aware there, and then, if I, step one is to be aware, I think, and then step two is remember that God is real, relevant, and cares about me, and he's present. And if I can do both of those things, I'm much more likely to be a better leader, make a better decision, do a better job with something, that type of thing.
I love that. Being aware, there's so much power. In fact, I've heard it said that emotions are excellent servants, but terrible masters. And so if I'm making them to serve me, it's to reestablish what is true, to recognize how I'm feeling in that moment, and anchoring in truth to make sure that those emotions are serving me and not mastering me and pushing me in ways I don't want to be pushed. So when they're operating and they can be told what to do, I can work them into a place with which, if I anchor into truth, I can be in control again. That's a disciplined process. But I think what you said there is really important. It's the understanding that the everyday practicing the presence of being aware of the Lord's presence and interacting with him is a big part of that anchoring of our emotions.
That's what I'm trying to do. It's hard to do it. It takes time, it takes practice, and when I messed it up, I think reviewing I didn't even remember. I didn't even remember that God is real and relevant today. Like I was in the middle of this thing, and I just did it in my own strength, and look at that. I could have done better here. I think recognizing those, being around people that care about me and that know me and can help with that, I think is important. Helping others do that. It's, anytime you're teaching someone, it's convicting, right? Because you're like, yeah, I'm telling this person to do that, but am I doing it myself? So there are lots of pieces to this to me.
There are. And if I could go back to the Jeff of 10 years ago, and I was to say to him something from what I've been learning here in our discussion, is don't allow perfection to drive your requests to God. Meaning, don't think that you're going to him to try to find the perfect answer, absent pain, the happy path, the prosperous path. In his way, he will prosper in his time. But that I wouldn't imagine my own conceiving of perfection and then say, okay, God, I need this right here. I would love to tell Jeff of 10 years ago, don't allow perfection to color your decisions to make, or the decision that you make, or you're coming to the Father, is that you're trusting him to bring it all together in his own way. Bryce, if you could go back to the Bryce from 10 years ago, based on what we've been talking about, what would be one piece of advice that you would give Bryce 10 years ago?
Yeah, great question. I think it'd be similar to what you just shared. I think, 10 years ago was a long time, and there's been a lot of things that have happened. Some of them have been wonderful. Some of them have been incredibly difficult at the time. And I think the more I can remember that it's not just me, not just my own wits, my own intelligence, my own experience, my own emotional intelligence, all those things that are all good. But it's not just that. I have a God that loves me, cares about me, and he's for me. He's for me, and he's going to be with me, no matter what occurs, whether I go through incredibly difficult things or not. I think there's a piece there that when I access that, it's really helpful to me, and I think it also shines well to the world, because I think when you see someone go through something difficult with all kinds of gratitude and courage and graciousness, I think that's compelling to the world. They want to know what that's all about.
Fantastic. Bryce, this has been really insightful. And when we talk about spiritual things, oftentimes they can seem impractical or ethereal. But what I'm learning and just sitting here with you is the process of practicing awareness of God, practicing awareness of my emotions, taking decisions to Him and understanding what are the material decisions and what are the ones that He's expecting me as I follow His commands to absorb and make on my own, and how do I continue to assert my leadership in the kingdom, both as an ambassador of God, as a priest, as well as a king who makes decisions and works to create dominion and build with which the gospel can go out and be more fruitful. So, Bryce, thanks for taking this time to have this discussion with me. I know how insightful it is every time I get to sit with you, but certainly to all of us that are getting to listen to your story and listen to the process that you use for decision making. Thank you.
Well, my privilege to be here, and I'm trying to get better at these things. I haven't always acted in all the ways that I would aspire to, but it's good. It's good reminder just talking it through with you today, and just thinking about what kind of person, what kind of leader, what kind of Christian I want to be going forward. And I think some of these things can be helpful.
Absolutely. And thank you for joining us here today on Leveraging Success. Every time that we're together, it's an opportunity to advance the ball in our lives, to live significant, extraordinary lives, not just successful, but to take that success and see to it that we have extraordinary families, extraordinary marriages, and extraordinary acts of service that will echo into eternity, that we'll be celebrating for days and years and thousands of millions of years to come. I hope you enjoyed this time. If you're watching on YouTube, subscribe to our channel. If you are also on YouTube and want to be able to be notified, please hit subscribe. And everybody who subscribes and gets notifications on this channel, it just helps to make awareness of the podcast. If you're on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, please leave us a message, rate the podcast, or send me a note at jeff@leveragingsuccesspodcast.com. I'd love your feedback on the topics that we've got here, and I'd love to answer your questions live when you send them in. All right. I appreciate, again, your time being with us, Bryce, and you who've joined us to listen to this podcast. Until next time, God bless you.